And happy Monday morning to you, Rodney.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. We are starting the day off right. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. I'm hearing good news out of LA, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But first, we want to welcome all of you to the chat session on the This Way Network. And happy
Yay.
Monday morning to you all. I see some of you coming in the comments already. We're so glad
Mhm.
you're here with us. And I know you're going to want to hear what Rodney's going to be bringing to us this morning because I've been anxious to know what's going on in LA. You've
Yeah.
had a lot of things happening, not the least of which is rain.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yay!
true. Yes,
Helping put out those fires.
we were very, very blessed. You know, it's a strange, well, no, it's not strange. My dear colleague, Dan Pettigrew, that I'm working with out here,
Mhm.
he called me and he was really concerned about the fires and everything. And he says,
Mhm.
and I mean, I'm serious. There was no call for rain. And he says, we need to pray for rain. That's what we need. We need to pray for rain. And I was thinking, like, okay, Dan. And so we did. We prayed for rain. And sure enough, I mean, it was just a couple of days later, here comes the rain. And so we actually have a a good, a good amount of rain. I mean, it really, really came down and it was really a blessing, and that was one of the things that Dan was talking about. And I think a lot of people were thinking the same thing. Boy, Lord, wouldn't it be great if it rained right about now? And sure enough, the clouds opened up, man. It got dark and the clouds started and it started pouring down. So we're very blessed about that.
Amen.
Yes, but there are couple of little problems with that. Now that we have rain, we kind of have a little problem.
Mhm.
Here in Southern California, especially after a fire, the ground is barren. And now there's an issue of floods. And now that's another thing. And also potential mudslides because the hills do not
Mm.
have the growth that they need. And so
Right.
I got an actual little report here. We are now under flood watch. And so
Oh,
flash flood
wow.
warnings and mud and debris flows caused by excessive rainfall. And this is in the Hughes area. They said that this is going to continue until about 10 o'clock this morning. I'm peeping out the window as we speak. It's not raining, it's just very cool and very overcast. But these burn areas could trigger flash flood and mud flows and different things like
Mhm.
that. And so the USG threshold says the debris flows and things are very possible. So they're telling everybody to keep their eye on this. And so you can check out weather.gov. And so
Mhm.
currently, the weather, let me see here. This was the actual report that came in. They say this fire had actually had 57,000 acres burned. Sadly,
Mm.
28 fatalities, 16,000 structures that were destroyed. Many of these are homes, and there were actually 301 spot wildfires that popped up places, and
Wow.
it was very, very devastating. We actually have some aerial shots. This is really what Los Angeles was looking like when these fires
Oh,
were.
my goodness.
And a lot of these were homes. And it's very, very sad that when those fires got going, it was the winds just drove these things. They say it was like a
Mhm.
blast furnace because of the Santa Ana winds. Normally, the winds don't do this. Normally, but the winds actually came over the mountains and pushed it down into
Mhm.
the community.
Mm.
And
Mm.
people said that there were, um, just minutes for them to get
Mhm.
away.
Mhm.
One of the saddest things is there is a very prominent area over in Pasadena, California. It's called Altadena, for some weird reason, there was a huge collection of very, very, very successful. It just turned out to be a very prominent African American community. And I mean, all the homes were over $1 million. So everyone over there were very well established. They had been there for a time. And literally, the Altadena Community Church burned down. And so these are just some of the images. This was a before and after picture. These things are starting to come in now. And sadly, you know, when the fire started, you know, I want to go to Matthew 24:24. Jesus said, for false Christ and false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders to deceive and possibly even the very elect. What you're looking at, this is a generated image. A lot of people thought the Hollywood sign was on fire. This is a fake. And this was the type of things that happened in the middle of this catastrophe. People were generating stuff and putting stuff online like this, and it created such a hysteria because people were like, oh my goodness, things are burning. And it really wasn't. And
you know, Rodney, I'm glad you put that up there. And I wanted to, would you put it back up there one more time?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So I want to point out, as real as that looks, notice how many D's there are in Hollywood in that sign. That's a telltale sign right there. Now, there are some that are much better about faking it. But I kind of think that maybe part of the reason people chose this to do that, Rodney, you can take that down now.
Yeah.
I'd rather see your face anyway. I think it's because for so many of us who have never been to LA and all we really know about is, oh, LA, that's where Hollywood is. And we've seen the postcards and the pictures of the iconic Hollywood sign. And I know that was one of the first things that I thought of. I kind of felt like, oh, wow, if that Hollywood sign burned down, I would feel like something monumental had happened, even though there's far worse things than that sign burning down. You know, your brain knows that, but in your heart, you're kind of like, the one iconic image that I know of as being LA and Hollywood, if that burned down, I would feel like something catastrophic had happened to LA. And this is kind of catastrophic, but I want to help people understand the real scope of this. So this is not a small event, but LA is huge. It's huge. And this is really just a percentage of LA that has been directly affected by these fires, right?
You're absolutely right. And so in the Pacific Palisades, again, this is kind of where it got started. And the strange thing about this is these fires, it's sad to say that the fire captain said that there were ambers. He actually held a piece of amber and it looked like a size of a charcoal brick. Literally, he says the winds were so strong, it was carrying these huge pieces of wood and literally planting in places and wedging into houses and starting other fires. And then when they started going, the wind was just, it was like a fan, and it was like throwing confetti in front of a fan. And so sadly, you know, we could only hope that this was a natural thing, that other people weren't setting fires, and they don't know. They haven't gotten to the bottom of it. And now they're saying that it could be a problem from the power utility, that they didn't shut off the power because, and you don't really want to go there, but a lot of people are trying to figure out really what caused this fire. And we actually have a report. This is a current news report that just came in, and they were talking about, as I was mentioning, it has been raining, and this is what they had to say about the potential of floods.
Crews in Southern California desperately digging trenches as the fire-ravaged region now prepares for a new threat: flooding and mudslides.
The fire basically causes it to be a lot more susceptible to erosion.
This group of National Guardsmen were called to help fight the fires. Now their team and LA County Public Works are creating giant ditches to hold water as Los Angeles County braces for thunderstorms and heavy rain. Much of Southern California is under a flood watch through Monday afternoon. The National Weather Service tweeting the threat is high enough to prepare for the worst case scenario. And while the rain is much needed for these areas scarred by wildfires, the ground is so dry that even a little bit of water can cause a lot of flooding.
There's nothing left holding the soil in place. So even one drop of rain will come down 7 times faster than it typically would have prior to this fire.
Over a 16-day period this month, firefighters say they've battled 10 different fires. The most destructive, the Palisades and Eaton fires, which combined torched more than 40,000 acres.
That water comes right into the communities that were so devastated by these tragic fires.
Even for homes that were spared by the fires, those houses could now experience flooding, which could cause a whole new issue for homeowners and insurance claims.
Flood is not covered by your basic home insurance policy either, and a lot of these people are not located in an area where they would think they might need a flood policy.
I'm Jen Sullivan reporting.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
now you're seeing that how serious this is, because the potential for flooding in certain areas, because as they said, there's no vegetation to kind of hold it. And how old is that sign, Rodney? Oh, the Hollywood sign. Oh my goodness, boy, the Hollywood sign dates back. I believe that Hollywood sign goes almost back to the pre-60s. I mean, it goes way, way, way.
Definitely. I actually looked this up because
Yeah.
she asked that. So thanks
Yeah.
for the question, Carrie. So it was erected in 1923.
23.
So
I
23.
wasn't around
it's,
then.
yeah, it's over 100 years old.
Wow.
And it
Yeah.
said the sign was developed to originally it was built to promote a new housing development called Hollywood Land. And so
Yeah.
it used to have the land at the end of the sign.
That's right. It did.
And yeah, and then it said it was only supposed to last a year and a half, but it remained up for about 25 years, promoting that housing
Mhm.
area. And it said it was repaired in 1939 and 1947, and the land part of the sign was removed in 1949. So not until after the Second World War. And then the sign was restored in 1978, and a security system was installed to prevent vandalism.
Right. And now that I do know, a lot of people come out here, and it's actually, that sign is actually on private property. There's a people who own that land where that
Mhm.
sign is. And it is the craziest thing. There are people who come here from all around the world, and they'll drive up I know the street. You can literally, it's right off of Fountain. And if you just come up Fountain and take a right and just start driving, you will keep going and you'll keep seeing the sign getting bigger and bigger. So people want to stop. But now there's a fence there, and people have bored through the fence, and they want to go out there and take pictures in front of it. But now they say that there is what they have is like laser. And if they see movement up there, here comes the LAPD. They're going to come pay you a visit, in the local security force. They will come up there, and you don't want to go up there mess around the sign, because you will leave with silver handcuffs on. So definitely.
Well,
Yeah.
well, we're glad to know the sign is safe anyway.
Yes.
But
Thank
let's get
goodness.
back to the other issues you were talking about. For one, the
Mhm.
possibility of flooding. So that
Right.
sounds pretty severe right there. I want to ask you about another iconic piece of Hollywood. I
Mhm.
remember reading a report that there was a fire in Studio City, and then I didn't hear anything more, and I thought, is Studio City gone? Is it, what
Well,
happened there?
again, there were pockets throughout, LA that did catch on fire. And Studio City is it's close to some smaller studios over in that area. And a lot of people, it's really strange that Warner Brothers, which is a big, big studio, it actually started out as a smaller studio in kind of over in the heart of Hollywood. Warner Brothers is now over near Burbank, California, but where the really big studio, but the original location was over in Hollywood. And so, and it was the Warner Brothers who kind of started that thing. And so, but sadly,
So Studio City had more to do with television, didn't it?
yeah, television. Yeah. So, and that's kind of where, but it's still a lot of industry things that happen over in Studio City. But again, there were some homes that were damaged. There were homes that were lost. And again, it just kind of, that fire moved around the city. But thank goodness, again, we have to be so thankful that Lord knows that this thing stopped, and that they have really, really worked hard to get this thing under control. And then they were doing all the water drops. A lot of people were complaining. And matter of fact, the fire chief for from Los Angeles, he made a statement and he says, you know, I hear these types of grumbling, and they were saying that, oh, there wasn't enough water. He says, I'm going to tell you, there was not enough water to handle that much. He goes, this was a phenomenon that even if the system was completely stocked, he goes, they didn't have enough water for all this. He goes, we really were caught off guard. And so, and then some people were saying, well, why did you just go out to the ocean? And my brother actually called me and he goes, why didn't they just go out to the ocean and scoop up water and come? I was like, Kenneth, you're asking me a question that I don't know. I said, but, and to some degree, they did go out and get reservoir water from different places. And so under the circumstances, there were very high winds. There were a lot of complicating factors that went into this. And so
I think the high winds at the beginning, I mean, they were so high is what I was hearing, like 100-mile-per-hour gusts and so forth.
right.
And you cannot take helicopters out in that, you know, and
Right.
expect to
And
have a good outcome. So
And
yeah.
if you notice those fire retardant planes, those are not little dinky planes. Those are things are like, I mean, they are huge. They're like passenger sized planes. And could you imagine having a load of water, the weight of water, and high winds, and you're having to hit these banking turns with this thing? Very dangerous flight conditions. And so to all of the first responders, they're very brave. The people in the helicopters, the firefighters, the volunteers, the police, everybody that were a part, and even the brave residents who worked so hard to try to get out of harm's way. And now, like I said, we had a lot of video footage, and there's a lot of talk about the people abandoning cars that had kind of clogged up the streets. They are going to, I'm sure they're going to make some kind of rules about this. And now people need to know, if you're going to abandon your car, don't just bail out of the car, because they had cars literally all over the street. They literally had to go in with bulldozers and start moving cars around. That could have been a bad, well, that really was a bad thing, because that slowed recovery and help a lot, because they had, by the time they got there, now they had to wait for these big bulldozers to come. It wasn't like the bulldozers were around the corner. So hopefully we will come away from this catastrophe more knowledgeable and more ready for these type of emergencies. And so, you know, again, you know, to all the families who have lost loved ones and property, God bless you. And now there's a big, you know, outpouring from different communities where people are literally giving things and trying to make a difference. I don't know how big the sponsors are that are coming through to help people, but it's sad. So many people lost everything, all the way down to clothes. And so there's going to be a great need for support.
It's like you said, yeah, some people only had minutes. They literally got out with their pets and their keys, you know, got in their car with their pets and their keys, and maybe were able to grab a few important papers or something, but that was it.
And
So,
and again, we want to make sure that people have an emergency plan. It could be it could be a flood, it could be fire. There could be so many other things. Where did people go on foot? Well, you know what? That was the whole thing. There were people who abandoned cars, and that is a huge question because and there were cars that were damaged. There were it was terrible, and I you know, that's a question that I just don't know, because when they started feeling that the roads were blocked or impassable, and they just couldn't get through, they panicked, and that's the whole thing. There was a lot of panic going on,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
as you can imagine, and so hopefully, again, we will come away from this with a better plan of
mhm,
how to get ready and actually be prepared, because here in California we have earthquakes and we have other little catastrophes that can pop up at any time, and this is a lesson for the whole nation to learn. This isn't
mhm,
just for us,
mhm.
this is everywhere, and I guarantee you, people all across the country are going, where are my birth certificates, where's the deed to my property, where, and people
Right.
are starting to ask these questions, and everyone should have a very uh, good plan where they have these things, where they can get them in an instant if needed.
Mhm,
And there's also, people need to know, you know, you need to have good
mhm.
communication between your families, because imagine running out, you know, I have two phones, but imagine if you run out and one of your phones for work and you forget your personal phone and you got all this paranoia going on.
Mhm.
Hey, you know, you need to have things really, really buttoned up, you
Yeah, or you don't have a charger
or you
with
don't have
you.
a
Yeah,
charger.
yeah, yeah. Just
So,
there's so many things that go into that, and there are plenty of
mhm,
places where
mhm,
you can go to get a list of here are the
mhm.
things that you need to put. Y'all just Google it. I'm serious. Just Google
Right.
it. It's out there on the internet. Here's the list of things that you need to have in what they call a bug out bag. If you ever had to bug out at the last minute, you could
Mhm,
literally grab this bag and
mhm.
go.
Right.
And some of that, yeah. Okay, that's a good question. Can a
Mhm.
fireproof safe withstand that type of fire?
Yeah, believe it or not, they have things that can withstand that. And again, a quality fire case, you know, it
Mhm,
may cost you, you know, close to 150, $200 or something like that. But again, that's the type of thing that you need. You need all your passports and all your critical documents inside a fireproof case.
mhm,
So all you have to do is grab it and go. And
mhm,
you know, it's better to be able to get out safely than to worry about things. And I know it's so hard to replace the memories, but there are certain people, they had to make a real hard decision, and they're like, I don't have time for this. I need to get out, because that
mhm,
fire came so fast. People had to literally run for their lives,
mhm,
and thank goodness
mhm,
that they did. And sadly, there were many people who, you know, their pet, they just did not have time, and so many pets were lost. And so there's a lot of sorrow. There's a lot of sad people between just the loss of life and property. It was pretty monumental, but thank God
mhm.
we're all here together, and hopefully the
Yeah.
prayers and the help will avail much for those who really, really need it. Because and thankfully, I wasn't directly impacted by it. I was close, but it there was a fire that did start in the area that I'm in, and thank goodness, you know, it's just we have to learn from these things by being prepared. And that's all I
Mhm,
can say. I
mhm.
really, you know,
So,
and so
yeah, I was looking at those stats you put up
mhm,
before, and
mhm.
301 wildfires that
Yeah,
they're
and they
dealing with, and I can understand it when you talk about those
mhm,
embers blowing
right.
over,
Yes, ma'am.
and especially big ones like that, that wind could
Right,
carry it that far and then drop
right,
it somewhere, and it would start a fire with the conditions being so dry. So,
right,
uh,
and
Rodney, let me give
mhm.
a few, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but
No,
let me
it's
give a
okay.
few stats here so that people understand
Mhm,
a little bit what the scope of this is. LA, this is from Wikipedia. Yeah, LA
Mhm.
covers 469 square miles, according to Wikipedia. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I did some looking. The last time I had looked for how many acres had burned in
Mhm.
Los Angeles, and I thought, well, how many acres are in a square mile?
Mhm.
There's 640 acres in a square mile.
You're right.
So
Mhm.
if 40,000 acres burned, that's 62.5 square miles. Now, that seems like a lot of area
Mhm.
until you compare it to, well, LA is 469 square miles. So
I'll
we're
tell you.
talking, yeah, it's still a significant amount of area, but
Mhm.
most of LA is still there. We're happy to say.
Yes, you're right, but I tell you, a lot of people, unless you've actually traveled to LA, I remember when I first moved to California, I was 19 years old and I was fearful of I drove, I knew where I was, but I was just kind of fearful because LA seemed like, oh, because I lived in Long Beach and I was like, and the valley was even worse. And so one day I gassed up my car and I said, Rodney, you have to quench this fear because I had a legitimate fear of being lost, because there's a lot of very complicated freeways. If you don't know what you're doing, you can really get lost. And so I drove into LA and I saw interchange and I just took it. And I said, I'm going to find my way home. It was a 200-mile trip. Oh, I drove out a tank full of gas, but I
Wow.
finally figured out LA, if you kind of look at it and you kind of cut it into four quadrants, Long Beach is here, and then the coastline is to your right. And so I just made this big, gigantic looping circle. I went through the valley and I realized I had to come back. And it was an all-day trip. But once I
Mhm.
figured it out, and then I looked at the map, I was making notes and I'm literally driving and scribbling notes on a notepad next to me. But I figured out how to get around. And so once you know your way around, it's not so bad. But you're absolutely right. There are huge plots of land. I mean, and when you're from
Mhm.
coming in from Riverside, coming into LA, that's like 60 miles one way coming into
Mm.
LA. So there's a whole lot of towns, a whole lot of businesses, a whole lot of homes, a whole lot of schools. And that was another thing. We lost a lot of schools in certain areas,
Mm.
banks. I mean, we just core things that are in the community. But again, we're thankful that the rain came. The Lord blessed us with some really good, solid rain, and it did make a huge impact. It made a huge impact on the rain, and I
Sure.
think that people were satisfied. And again, it's just, and hopefully it would wash away some of the sorrows too. And as we prepare, there's a gentleman. I wish, as a matter of fact, if I would have had a little more time, I got a call from a gentleman on the East Coast, and they do the type of recon after huge disasters. And so they were calling me, asking me, Rodney, who could we contact in the city of Los Angeles? Because we are ready to go. We have equipment, we have manpower, we're ready to hire people. So I was like, wow. So that's something this week that I will be going through my little Rolodex on and trying to connect the dots. And
Mhm.
hopefully, because there's so much need uh
Oh, yeah.
here in LA to be able, because there are people who just they don't know where to begin because everything is
Mhm.
it needs
Mhm.
to be checked, it needs to be cleaned up, and you have to be very careful because some of this stuff is hazardous material. and
Mhm.
and that was another thing. A lot of people were upset because they were saying, well, there's water right out here on the ocean. That could be a potential problem because if you dump uh salt water onto property, it could cause damage.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't know that. And so
Mhm.
I don't know if that was a reason that they were trying to deal with freshwater sources, but in some
I think it has to be. Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
Let me just share a little story with you here. This is
Mhm.
deviating slightly. Y'all pardon me
No
for this.
problem.
Uh, my husband was a nuclear engineer at a power plant, and
Oh,
um, one of the things that he did, he was in an industry-wide safety committee
mhm.
that helped power plants and nuclear plants prepare for any contingent emergency, right?
Right.
So you remember that huge earthquake they had in Japan several years ago?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, with the enormous tsunami that came in, etc.
Mhm.
So there was a nuclear plant there that
Right.
was near the ocean, now set up, high enough.
Mhm.
The previous highest tsunami they had ever had there was about 25 feet. They had put markers on the land there and said, you cannot build below this because this is the highest
Right.
it's ever come, and we're not letting you build below it. So the
Mhm.
nuclear plant had been built above that, the homes had been built above that. Well, the tsunami that came in, because this earthquake was so huge, was 40 feet.
Right.
40 feet.
Mhm.
So the nuclear plant became deluged,
Mhm.
okay? And then, of course, things stopped working. And when things stopped working, they started having a core meltdown.
Right.
So they were trying to lower the temperature of the fuel, and they literally got in the ocean. They took water cannons and they started spraying it on the
Mhm.
nuclear plant, trying
Right.
to bring down the
The
temperature of the
temperature.
fuel that was melting, right? Well, I was watching this with my husband standing there, and I had just told him about it. He didn't even know about it. He came in, he was watching it on the TV with me, and I said, "This is what they're doing to cool it down." And he said, "Oh no." I said, "Is that bad?" And he said, "If they're spraying salt water on that, that's very bad." And I asked him why, and he said, that salt water is going to interact with some of the chemicals and not just the chemicals, but the spent fuel there.
Mhm.
And it's going to create hydrogen, and that's going to build up and cause an explosion. And just a few minutes later, that's exactly what happened. It exploded, and then there was no containment.
Right.
Everything went dark, and and you had people trapped there. You had
Right.
people trapped in the power plant who are now exposed to this radiation, and the best they can do is stay there and try to, because the
Mm.
all the controls are not working because they're all
Right.
run by electricity, and now there's no electricity. They had power generators, but they had power generators on the first floor. So
Right.
when the tsunami came in, it took out all the generators they had. So, they learned from this. This is what you were
Right.
talking about with learning from every disaster. They
Mhm.
learned, oh, well, if we're going to have power generators, they can't be on the first floor. We're going to have
Okay.
them somewhere else. And so they started changing things to develop it. But
Mhm.
this is the sort of thing our leaders have to be able to think about is, yeah,
Right.
we've got an ocean right there. It seems like, oh, we've got all the water we need. We can just
Mhm.
go ahead but no, you don't know what it's going to interact with. You don't know if it's going to damage the very planes that are picking it up or the
Right.
instrumentation or whatever. And of course, then when you dump it on the land, at the
Mhm.
very least, what is going to happen is it's going to put salt in the land, and nothing's going to grow there for many
Right.
years
And see,
after that.
all
So,
of these
yeah.
all of these things are very, very valid, and and people are just trying to figure out how did something like this get so far out of control so fast, and we have someone, and Chloe says this is so interesting to me. I live 7 miles from a nuclear power, and tsunamis are so interesting. Yeah, and it's been you know that thing that happened in Japan was a major catastrophe because when you start talking about those waves coming in and washing through towns, and they just washed the cars through town
Oh,
like
yeah.
as if they were nothing. Buildings, anything in its path,
Mhm. Mhm.
was completely wiped out. And I believe that tsunami also kind of affected Thailand. I had a
Mhm.
friend
That was a
who
different tsunami.
That was a
Yeah, it
different
was a different tsunami, but yes, there
different
was one.
tsunami, but the
Yeah.
one that happened in Thailand, I had a friend that was actually in Thailand. And do you remember they had there was video of it coming into this beach area where everybody was out on lounge chairs and they had all these gazebos and different things out there. Well, that was a very kind of like it was a hotel, but a restaurant and everything. And it was a very popular restaurant where everybody wanted to hang out. My friend and his brother were there, and they were on the backside of the island. And his one brother kept saying, "Hey man, let's go to that place. They got really great seafood. Let's go down to go over there." And the one brother kept telling him, "No, no, we don't need to do that. Let's just stay where we are. I don't feel like traveling over there. Let's just stay here." And the other brother kept telling him, "Let's go, let's go." And he said, "No, I don't want to go. We're going to stay here." And it's a good thing that the one brother said no, because they would have been sitting. He told me, he goes, "I would have been sitting right there," because he had a favorite seat that was like the restaurant, and you were right on the water, and they would serve you. They bring you your food out right there. And he said, I would have been sitting right there when that thing came in. And they said that tsunami came in at 120 miles per hour. So when you saw it, it just looked like the ocean was rising, but it was coming. And by the time you realized that that thing was getting close, it's coming at 120 miles an hour. By the time you jump up and start running, it would just come in. And so,
There are, I remember, I just saw this recently, a story about a girl who in school had been learning about tsunamis and what happens right before you have them.
right.
And then she and her family were vacationing in Thailand when that one came in. And she said, I noticed that all the water went out.
Went
at the
out.
beach.
That's right.
Yeah, it goes out first. And she said, and even before that happened, she had been noticing, I think she was saying something about the water turning foamy, like really foamy or bubbly, or I don't remember what
Right.
it was she said. I'd have to look that up. But anyway, she noticed that and she was like, "Oh no, I learned about this in school. There's a tsunami coming." And she
Right.
told her family, and they kind of, and she was like, "I'm getting out of here." And she
Right.
started going, and then her siblings started going with her, and
Mhm.
eventually her whole family left. And she was like, "We have to get to high ground. We've got to."
Right.
And she literally saved her family and a lot of
Mhm.
other people just because she knew that
You
and
know,
got out of there before the water hit.
and another thing is they say that which is really incredible, and God has made everything with his spirit, of course. But they
Mhm.
say that when catastrophes are coming, they say one of the best warning signs are pets. If pets start
Yes.
acting crazy, pets know that earthquakes are coming. They know, they have a sense. I guess they can smell fire
Mhm.
and different things way beyond
Mhm.
the humans can. And dogs and cats will start panicking, and if you see your cat panicking or your dog,
Mhm.
you need to kind of say, "Hey, what's going on?" And you need to start doing some research and figuring out what's going on, because something very well could be coming. and
Mhm.
and again, what we're talking about is about being prepared. And again,
Mhm.
you always have to think about your little pets and things like that, because if you do have to leave in an emergency, you want to make sure that you can grab and Chloe was just making a mention of that. All of the animals they do run the high ground, and it's really haunting. Yep.
Yeah,
They
she said the reason they could feel the changes is the electromagnetic part of the earth. That's what they can sense. Is those
interesting.
changes there.
Interesting.
So that is very interesting. So
Yeah.
Rodney, let's circle back around because you started talking about um, the evacuees. We had talked about the people who literally had to leave with
Hmm.
nothing but their car keys and their pets, and
Hmm.
sometimes couldn't even get their pets out. So, as an evacuee,
Hmm.
uh, what is their experience? Where are they going to go when they have fled their homes
Funny.
and they have nothing? And
Mhm. Well, you know
you
what?
know.
I talked to several of my friends, and they were at families' homes. When
Mhm.
they left, they went to friends, they went to families. out of town. I mean, I had a friend that was near Altadena where the fire did all that damage that I showed you the pictures of. Pasadena is close to Altadena. Her home was spared, thank God. But she said when that fire got started, she said it was like 2 blocks away. So she was able to get her dogs, get some paperwork, grabbed a bag of clothes, and they fled. And they went to Palm Springs. So apparently she had friends or relatives in Palm Springs. And Palm Springs from Pasadena is over 100 miles, I would say, close to about almost 100 miles away. So she left and went to her family's house and just had to watch the news and worry. And that must have been a terrible feeling. And so for a couple of days, she just had to wonder what was happening, because all of her neighbors, they all fled too. So they didn't have any answers. So after a couple of days, what happens is you have to kind of show residency, be able to show proof that you live in this area. And the police are very suspect. They don't just let anybody in, because you got really sad and evil people that would go in and start stealing stuff, anything that wasn't nailed down. So she went back, and thank goodness she found her home in one piece. But there are schools, there are churches, there are emergency facilities that open up in these times of trouble. And of course, the radio stations and things were broadcasting, because information starts coming in, and they really do try to get that information out in the airwaves. And then of course the news start running stories about emergency facilities that are opened up. So again,
let me it's something I want to put out there.
Sure.
What you just told us, because we went through something here. We don't have very many, big natural disasters here, but back in 2011, we had 5 tornadoes hit our county in one day.
Wow.
And one of them was a Cat 5.
That's
and
weird.
did very huge damage to the whole infrastructure. So the entire county was without power for a long time. I know at our house we were without power for almost a whole week, and while they were trying to get it back up. So what I remember about that was that we didn't have cell service because it had taken down some of the cell towers, et cetera. And we didn't have a way to get information because it wasn't like you could text people or call them or whatever.
Right.
And what we found so valuable was to get on the radio, and listen. And for people who could call into the radio, some of them did and ask questions, but on the radio, you could get all the information about where you could go locally, if there was a shelter, where you could go to get food, who had power, or what the power company said about power being restored when it was coming back, that sort of thing. So, and I wanted to let people know as well that there are radios you can get that are crank powered.
That's right.
You can crank them up.
Mhm.
And they will last for about an hour until you crank them up again. So the
Right.
good news about that is you don't have to have a charger. You don't have to have your, run down your car battery so you can listen to the radio. You can get radios that crank up like that, and they usually have like a flashlight on them as well.
Right.
And some of them now you can crank them up, and they actually have a port where it generates some electricity and you can charge your phone off of it, which I think is amazing. So
These are, and Carrie had asked, about, some of the veterans that my colleague is James Andrew. He's a tailor. We did the event together. And so Carrie was asking, how were the veterans and stuff like that? Of course, there were so many people, and again, imagine being already being homeless and having this fire hit. It was so devastating. But the things that you were mentioning, the crank radio, making sure that you have a plan, having this emergency kit, also having an evacuation map, knowing where you are and knowing, well, if this is blocked, how can I get out of here? all of these things are very, very, very important.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
having a plan in place and making sure that you have a checkoff list.
Mhm.
Every family should have. And oh, this is another thing. This is something I also learned that during an earthquake or a catastrophe, if the phone lines go down, do you know they say the lines that go down are the local phone lines, but if you need to reach somebody out of town, if you're calling a area outside of your area, oftentimes you will be able to get a message out if you're calling out of your area. And so sometimes the local phones in your area may go down, but if you call a different area code, so it's good to actually have a friend or a contact point where you could call somebody out of your area, and hopefully, if your people say, well, something's going on, I'm going to call our cousin that might be out of state to see had anybody checked in. And so you have to have
Mhm.
plans like that and
That's
really
a good idea.
yeah. So
Yeah, a really good idea.
yeah.
I've also noticed on Facebook, they
Hmm.
have a feature where I don't know who starts this or how it happens, but they usually have a feature where if there's some
Hmm.
natural disaster or some other,
Hmm.
big kind of um, catastrophe that happens,
Hmm.
that people on Facebook can get
Hmm.
a message to family or friends by going to that on Facebook and checking in and saying,
Right.
I'm
I'm
okay.
okay.
And
Yeah.
then, yeah, and then your friends and family, because you checked in, will get a notification that you checked in and that you're
Yeah.
okay.
All of these things are great things that we all need to think about ahead of time, because it's hard
Mhm.
to think of all of this stuff and try to prepare at the last minute. And especially, you
Mhm.
have someone banging on your door, or you're getting an alert to your phone that you need to evacuate, because that's where I got an alert that popped into my phone too, that that was giving warnings and things, and I was like, gee whiz. And so, but thank goodness, like I said, that you know this was a situation that was very bad. Thank goodness that it did not get any worse than it already did. I mean,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
that thing could have burned, and thank goodness that the winds kind of lightened up just a little bit. I mean, it did lighten up a little bit, and
Mhm.
that helped. And of course, people were, and another thing that I did want to bring up, a lot of people kind of were concerned, but they do something called a controlled burn. They will, if a fire is in a particular place, they will get ahead of it and burn an area, or if they could
Mhm.
keep that under control, they'll set another fire so that by time the fire gets to it, it runs out of fuel.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so
I did see, but I also did see
mhm,
something several places in the news. People were talking about that and saying that um, they were very upset because there were some regulations or laws in California where they didn't allow them to do that. So it hadn't happened for years that they had done any
mhm,
brush control or done these controlled burns. And therefore,
mhm.
when a fire did happen, it made it so much worse and easier to spread.
There are gonna
So,
be there are gonna be a lot of changes, and they're going through everything from
good.
city, state, and federal. There's a lot of questions that are being asked, and they're doing a
Mhm.
lot of research and trying to figure out who could possibly have had anything to do with this. And so it's kind of bad, but the
Mhm.
money is in the trillion, billions and billions and billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars in damage, because
Mhm.
by the time you start adding up all the claims and everything, it's going to be pretty monumental. Pretty
Well,
much.
yeah, and not just what was lost, but also the, potential economic impact, those businesses that are no
Mhm,
longer there, people who have no place to go, or even if they've got a place to go,
mhm,
uh, a lot of people, I think, are gonna end up saying, especially if they find it very hard to rebuild because they can't
mhm,
afford to, or they didn't have insurance, and that was another thing, a lot of insurance companies had pulled out of California before
Yeah.
the fires ever happened. Um,
Mhm.
and I think some of them felt like, oh, we can see the handwriting on the wall. There's like a potential disaster just waiting to happen here, and our companies will fold if we have to pay for all of that. So we're just going
Yeah.
to pull out now, so we won't be there when that happens. So,
Oh, and I wanna bring up a point. My colleague, had called me, and he had shared something with me, and he said, if you have a insurance and you were actually burned out and they start waffling on, uh paying.
mhm,
He actually said you could call the broker, which is actually like the parent of your insurance company. He goes,
mhm,
there's always your insurance company, but there's actually somebody behind them that's insuring that insurance company.
mhm,
He goes, take your claim to them. Don't worry about your immediate, go to the one that's insuring your insurance company and put in a claim there. And a lot of people didn't know that. And so
mhm.
there's some pretty heavy stuff that's going to
Yeah.
go on because people are trying to figure out where to pick the pieces up. And so again,
Mhm.
the businesses that you were talking about that were impact, I mean, there were grocery stores and your typical laundry,
Mhm.
tailor shops and
Yeah,
all that
drugstores and restaurants and,
gone.
all sorts of yeah,
Gone. And there
yeah.
was a very famous restaurant in Malibu called Moonshadow, and that had been there. It's right on the water, and this thing burned down, and a lot of the community were really, really hurt by that because
Mhm.
that was like
Mhm.
their local hangout, and they would go have breakfast or
Mhm.
dinner, and it's right there I mean, literally right on the cliff overlooking the ocean, and that thing is gone. And
Yeah.
so
I'm concerned some of these areas are not gonna come back, and if they do, it will not be for a long, long while, and I think there will be some people, maybe a lot of people, who cannot afford to rebuild for whatever reason,
mhm.
and they'll end up leaving LA.
Well,
So,
the
and
thing
that will have its own economic impact.
it will, and the sad
Mhm.
part of this is when there are these huge catastrophes, it opens up opportunities for people who are financially strong to come in, and they'll like, "Hey, I know I'm sorry you've lost your place, and yeah, your place was probably valued at $4 million, but we'll give you 800,000." And most people say,
Mhm.
I'm gonna pick up the pieces and go. And that those entities will gobble up large parcels of
Mhm.
this land, pennies on the dollar, and
Mhm.
turn it into a windfall for them. And will it change the topography and the whole layout and landscape of LA? Oh yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
especially Altadena, especially over in the Pacific Palisades, this whole thing is the whole area is going to look like a new city. It's going to look new because, and
Mhm.
and again, there are opportunities for blessed people to come in and to make the city better than it was. Is it possible? Don't know. If you talk to the residents, nothing could be better than their hometown, of course, but
Mhm.
this is gonna have to be rebuilt. It's gonna have to be. You can the area that you were talking about, it would look like the desert in the middle of the city. Because I mean, once they clear all this stuff, it it's all it's mind-boggling. It really is.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when the cleanup process begins, the amount of space that is gonna be opened up. Wait till you see the aerial shots in the months to come. It's gonna be or a year from now. Once they get this stuff cleared off, it's gonna look so sketchy and patchy, and that because that's a
Mhm.
huge area
Mm.
that caught on fire, and all the structures were either heavily damaged, if not destroyed. So, you know, I just all I can say is that we're very, again, this is this is something that we've learned a huge lesson here in California, and I hope other cities and states are taking note, because this is something that it's going to make a huge difference. And now, there's some serious heavy grumbling from the community, and now they're looking at the political leaders. And I'm thinking to myself that, that's a tough position to be in when you are in politics. There's certain things that are within your control. There's certain things that are just beyond your control. That's why, these acts that come in. So
Yeah. And that's another thing I wanted to bring
Mhm.
up with you, Rodney, was
Sure.
I know President Trump made a visit to LA,
He
flew
did.
over the Pacific Palisades area, and I saw the news conferences and him sitting there with the mayor and the governor
Mhm.
and so forth, and talking about what needs to be done. And one of the things he mentioned
Mhm.
was he feels like FEMA, there needs to be a huge overhaul with FEMA, and or just get rid of FEMA completely. And he said, no, what we need to do is have the federal government send the money to the state and let the state administer it, and let the local authorities administer that, because they're the ones who understand what's going on the ground, and what needs to happen, where the needs are. They know their own people in their own area. And I
Mhm.
do think that that is a very valid point.
Right.
Um, and it, particularly in North Carolina, I
Mhm.
kind of felt like, yeah, that's what should have happened there.
Yeah.
But then I think about LA, and
Mhm.
honestly, with so much we're hearing about the possible, um, some people are pointing fingers at the political leaders
Mhm.
in California who have been there for a very long time, and saying, "Oh yeah, you're the ones who got us in that position, so we don't need you to be the ones who administer these funds, because we've already given you
Right.
lots of money, and look what we haven't gotten for our money."
Yeah.
So I know some people
Yeah.
are a little nervous about that. I'm nervous for Los Angeles about that. I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure I want those people to be the ones to administer that money, because they kind of help get them into
Well,
that mess to begin with.
you're right. And so, but there are going to be organizations that, like for an example, a lot of people don't realize, um, one of the greatest organizations is the Salvation Army. And I had some dealings with them. Salvation Army, they've been around for over 100, and I believe almost like close to 160 years
Mhm,
that they've been around. And they're an international organization and nonprofit, and and relief,
mhm,
in their wheelhouse. But they the thing about them, they have a very high rating, and they had
mhm,
like it's almost like 80% of all the dollars that come in go out in services. And see,
mhm,
that's the difference. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that take, and they don't give that much out. And
mhm,
that's
mhm,
a problem. And so, matter of fact, I'm establishing the Rippey Foundation, and my plan is to work with at-risk youth, senior citizens, and veterans. And I want to be a solution. The more I get in, the more I want to do. And I'm in the process and the throes of getting that set up. And hopefully, once it's official and everything is set and I have my nonprofit status, I will be able to provide these services. And there are grants and things out there. And hopefully, that's another thing for people. I don't know, and I'm starting to kind of dig in. What is going to be part of the recovery? Will there be grant money available?
mhm,
How can people access real hard dollars to
mhm,
help them pick up the pieces? And there are some people who will
mhm,
need to be relocated. And I just don't like the idea of people not having homes. And I really don't want to see these huge,
mhm,
massive apartment structures, because that's just not quality of life. When you start looking at, you know, having a home and a family, that's a big difference,
mhm,
than living in an apartment or a condo and stuff like that. I hate to throw stones at people who build and own apartments, but it's just that hopefully we can get people back in homes, and because
Mhm.
where there are homes, there are community, and where there's homes and community, there are family and there's
Mhm.
stability. And so
Mhm.
hopefully we're going to be able to see some of that return to California, because there are a lot of people and they were very successful. I mean, a lot of these people, they bought in these areas back in the day. I mean, they bought back in the day and maybe they paid,
Mhm.
you know, $80,000 for their home back in the day, or they were just fortunate to have a strong job where they could afford to
Mhm.
be in a nice area. And lo and behold, those houses are millions of dollars now. So imagine starting out at 80,000 and your house is worth millions of dollars and it burns down. And it's
Mhm.
how do you replace that? How do you rebuild? So again,
Yeah,
hopefully,
and you
yeah.
and especially if you don't have insurance, which most I think do not, because the price of insurance just,
Mm-hmm.
got too crazy. Once your house is valued at $1 million, then
Mm-hmm.
you have to pay insurance that is kind of, based off of that price.
I could
But
imagine.
yeah, but so that could kind of price you right out of the market of even having insurance. And then even if your house burns down, now if you've got a mortgage on it, you still have to pay the mortgage, even though you don't have a house to live in. So there's that. There's nothing to pay off your mortgage. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you could rebuild, right away, your property value goes up. And
Mm-hmm.
now you're having to pay more in property taxes
And
just
also
because
too,
of, yeah.
a lot of people, if you have a car, oftentimes if you're making car payments on it, that car payment, you have to carry full coverage insurance. If oftentimes if you're paying for, if you have a car and you're making payments. So there were a lot of cars that were wiped out in this thing. And so that's going to
Mhm.
be a whole nother issue that has to get
Mhm.
straightened out, because transportation is going to be a key part of getting people moving again, and not only
Mhm.
just your typical transportation. There were people who had a lot of toys and boats and jet
Mm.
skis and, oh my goodness, and classic cars and, oh God. And so I know some people, and I've been watching some videos from some people that I know loosely, and seeing they had pretty nice car collections and they lost everything. And I was like, oh. And
Mm.
so it's painful. It's
Yeah.
really painful. So I mean, but again, if you got the Lord, boy, you got everything, and you got your life, and hopefully, these people will be able to pick up the pieces. And again, like I said, it seems as though a lot of people are pitching in. They did say the Red Cross. There was something I saw on the news that, if you're needing help or relief, and the American Red Cross, they're getting involved. So you know,
I'd like to make a pitch for Samaritan's Purse.
mm-hmm,
Everywhere they have been, the people that they're serving have
mm-hmm,
had nothing but good things to say about them, about how quickly they get there. I can tell you in that event we had back in 2011 with those
mm-hmm,
tornadoes that
mm-hmm.
all came in on one day, uh, my house was one of the ones that was damaged by a tornado.
Wow.
And within 2 hours, there was someone from Samaritan's Purse at my door asking me if I needed a tarp for my roof. They were taking tarps around to people that had trees down on, and that's what we had. They had trees down on their roof, and they were like, "Do you need a tarp to help protect your home from the next round of rain
Mhm.
and so forth that is
Uh,
coming, and mitigate the damage?" So
wow.
they have a volunteer network
Mhm.
that is like everywhere, and they're a faith-based organization,
Mhm.
and they do tremendous, tremendous work and have a marvelous reputation. And I know they're already in LA.
Mhm.
So if you want to hook up Samaritan's Purse, Salvation Army in
Mhm.
particular, um, either one of those, I say, yeah, go for it.
Well, I tell you, I appreciate, your questions and everything, and I know that we are going to be looking ahead and trying to see what is going to be next for the state of California and especially Los Angeles. And I'm going to dig in and do as much fact finding as I can, and hopefully if I have anything interesting, I'll be able to bring it back to our viewers up there. And I appreciate you. And I think we're about out of time. It is about
Yep,
that time.
we are. We're already
Yep.
past time. So,
Yeah.
but Rodney, thank you so much for giving us this update. We really appreciate
Yeah.
getting to hear all these things because we've all been wondering,
Right.
and the questions that we're wondering, we really don't have anyone to ask them to except
And
someone who's there like you. So,
and please keep praying, not only for me, but keep praying for all the people here in Southern California. Not only just Southern California, pray for your neighbors wherever you're watching. Make
yes,
sure you pray for your family, pray for yourself, pray for someone who you don't even know. Just put that blanket prayer out there, because I'm gonna tell you, the Lord hears every last one of them, and it means
yes,
a lot. And so, and I'm
yes,
sure people need strength, they need encouragement, they need hope, they need blessings, they need giving, they need so
mhm,
much. And so that's where we are. So make sure that you
yeah.
make sure you pray. And I guess, Nina, I'm gonna let you close us out.
All right. Thank you for joining us today, everyone.
Yep.
And I hope you'll come back next week.
Yep.
We'll be here on every Monday, and we just appreciate you so much. And y'all be of good courage
Yep.
because God is with us and we aren't alone. Bye, everybody.
Have a great week, everybody. God bless and take care, and let somebody know you love them. Bye-bye.
Amen.